So that if we start off with Project Gutenberg text, we can just take a look at that. And we can find all the different contexts in which any particular word is used. So I'll just go for the basic HTML layout and find an item. And I'll put in, well, we start with wealth, okay, and we find that we've got it says at the bottom here, one of 3 matches. Can you see that? So you know it comes in 3 times, and you can see each context, okay? For the wealth of the Indies, I wouldn't, any gap on your fireside I wouldn't make for the wealth of the Indies. So he's referring to the colonies and the wealth in the colonies in that context. Wealth worshippers, time servers and wealth worshippers, okay, he's criticizing those who just live for money in the second context. And in the third context, any portion of the wealth that may be accumulated by our descendants. So it's just talking practically about money and how it gets passed on through inheritance. So the 3 occurrences there. And poverty, by contrast, we've got 7 results. So we look at mimicking his poverty, copying his poverty, all right? The students are making fun of Mr. Mel because he dresses poorly. They're mimicking his poor qualities of poverty. I had dreams of poverty, all right? I had no fears of poverty, all right? So we can see all the different contexts in which a word or expression is used. Sometimes it may be useful just to select the whole text, select all, edit, copy, and to put it into a word processing file. Yeah, so I must not copied it properly. Just what happened. Here we are. We still edit. Oh, I see. Edit, select all, edit, copy, and then we go into the word processing file and we paste the whole text in here. And then we can do all the normal sorts of searches that we do inside a word processing program. Okay. You can search inside the document. You can the find and replace menu. All right, we can change one word for another, and it'll tell you. So, I mean, if we put in this particular program, it's quite a recent program. So, if you put in something like wealth, it'll actually give you all the contexts, right here. But depending on what program you're using, it may not give you those contexts so easily. But basically, you can search around inside a text and you can find all kinds of lexical items. And I've had some very good papers written by students who've had some quite good imaginative ideas about this. I think the best one so far I put up online, it's on my website, and it's about colour in Jane Eyre. Student just had the idea, let's go through the text looking for different expressions of colour. Red, grey, and found that Jane starts the story always in black and white and grey. And by the end of the story, she's wearing a blue dress, all right? She's moving into colour, all right? That was one aspect of the use of colour in that novel. And another aspect of the use of colour was the way that the word red was associated with anger and sort of passion. And again, she moves. She is a passionate young girl. So although she dresses in black and white and grey, she's got this red passion about her, and that again fades out as the story develops. So the red passion moves away into a kind of blue and green serenity, and her clothing moves from grey or black and white into sort of pastel-coloured, pretty kind of clothing. So, it's a very interesting study, based largely on, having the imagination to look for a particular thing inside the text. So that's one way that we can go about it. But we do have to be very careful, because, you see, we can end up making mistakes here. we see, okay, there's only 3 occurrences of wealth and there's 7 occurrences of poverty. Does that mean that he's more interested in poverty than in wealth? Well, it might do, but we need to be very careful about the way we go about it. We can't just say, oh, let's just try it. Let's put in, rich 26 matches and poor 199 matches. Yatta! We found it out. He's more interested in poor than in rich. Is that really going to work? Let's try it. Okay? Rich. Oh, first example is the name Richard. Oops. Second example, the fruit clusters on the trees, riper and richer than fruit had ever been. So it's talking about the richness, the rich taste of the fruit, or the rich quality of it. It's not about money rich. A rich, his regular eyebrows and the rich white and black and brown of his complexion, the rich colour of his complexion. It's not about money. It's a different kind of rich. Okay? Steerforth's mother was a widow and rich. Okay, yeah, but again, finally we found something. All right, this is wealth, but it's the 4th one out of 5 that I'm going to check, and we'd need to go through the whole list to find out how many of them are really talking about rich in the sense of money rich. The next one also, in this coffer, his riches had hid themselves. All right, again, this is money rich. Okay, so we need to look at each particular context. It's not enough just to look at the total results, and that's even more apparent when we look at poor. Let's look at poor here. My poor dear mother. It means my kawaii na okaasan. It means my pitiful mother. Doesn't mean poor in money. She wasn't poor in money. Okay, so it has a completely different meaning. Miss Betsy as my poor mother always called her. Okay, so second use is no good. In fact, we're going to find that all 5 of the uses, poorly in health, meaning ill, byorki, basically, poorly. And my poor dear mother, again, and again, my mother, poor thing. All right, so of the first 5 references to poor, not one of them has got to do with money. So we would need to be very careful before we started just looking at the data and thinking, oh, that shows what I wanted it to show. He's more interested in poverty than in wealth. Because it doesn't, not so far. We'd have to go through all of the results and check them, carefully. So please don't just assume that you can find results that sort of easily. Okay. We can't just look at the occurrences of keywords or expressions and draw conclusions from them, all right, at the end of this first section. We need to examine the context in which these words and expressions appear. So I'm going to move on now to a very incredible feature of Google, which is called the Ngram, which I don't know if you've seen before, but people are talking about it. It's the latest big buzz. And so let's take a look at the Ngram. Not difficult to find it. All you've got to do is go into the Google search box and put in Ngram. Whoops, what's happening? Ngram. All right, and you're into something called Ngram Viewer, which basically gives an analysis of everything in Google Books. Now, if you think about it, Google Books is a huge database. It doesn't just contain modern books, it contains books that are out of copyright from the Victorian period. It's got a whole load of stuff in it. So this makes it possible to navigate not just easily within a text, but we can work with a range of texts, a variety of texts, a very huge range of texts in this case. So we could look at, as you can see, it gives an example. Okay, Frankenstein references have sort of have gone up and up and up. Albert Einstein, references have gone up like that. Sherlock Holmes, he was a little bit more popular in 1920 than he seems to be today, okay? So it's just an example. But we can put in anything that we like. We can use, here our own search parameters to find out the sorts of things that we want to know. Now, for example, we know that Oliver Twist was written in protest against the new Poor Law, which was sometimes also called the Poor Law Amendment Act. Let's take a look for that. I mean, who else in Dickens's day was talking about the new Poor Law? Who was talking about the Poor Law Amendment Act? Okay. And we find that, right around the time, when Oliver Twist was being published in 1839, he began it in 1837, and it was serialized over 20 months, and it completed in 1839. So round about that time, there was a huge spike in talk about this, and obviously that's connected with the fact that the new law was being made at that time. But there was a tremendous amount of debate about the new Poor Law. It's not like Dickens is the only person who's talking about it. There are, plenty of texts that are talking about it. This is showing you, by the way, the percentage of the total. It still looks like a very, very small percentage of the total number of texts, okay? But from our point of view, it's significant because, of course, hundreds of thousands of texts were being published every year, and a lot of them are there on Google. So we wouldn't expect most texts to be talking about it. We don't expect a relatively small number. But the point is that we can not only see, the pattern of people talking about these laws, and you can see that, well, there was some increase in debate on it. By this time, they were tending to call it the Poor Law Amendment Act. But there was some sort of debate around about, the turn of the century there. But the main discussion about it was at the, late 1830s, early 1840s. But it's not just that we can see that in a gross sort of general way, it's that we can look at now the publications for particular dates. So that, okay, let's take a look at before the publication or round about the time, up to the time of the publication of Oliver Twist. You've got from 1800 to 1840. Let's take a look and see what's being published there. Okay. And we've got Plain Remarks upon the New Poor Law Amendment Act by Thomas Garnier in 1935, an entire book on, okay. Another one that's obviously very angry, damnation, eternal damnation to somebody. I wonder who's getting eternal damnation. Clearly, somebody feels very strongly about this whole New Poor Law business, that they're going to go to hell for this. Who's going to go to hell? All right, we would need to look at these texts. I chose this third one here, Mary Wilden, A Victim to the New Poor Law. It talks about Malthusian ideas, and it talks about Marcuse, who was the sort of developing a more shakai shugi kind of socialist approach to analysing society. And, okay, Mary Wilden, A Victim to the New Poor Law, and it's really kind of incredibly attacking the society here. If I can get it to perhaps zoom out. Yeah. Who are the victims of this infernal new poor law of yours, my lord? This is addressed to a particular politician of the time, whose name is John Russell. Lord John Russell, who is one of the proponents of this law, one of the people who's trying to get it through Parliament. Who are the victims of this infernal new poor law of yours, my lord? They are the worn-out, honest, industrious labourers who have contributed through life to the support of great lazy lubbers. Namakemono, lubber, just anyway, lazy people. They are poor, afflicted creatures, male and female, whom it hath pleased God, we know not why, to afflict with mental and bodily diseases. They are poor infants and children, deprived of or torn from their fathers, their mothers, and all their natural relatives. They are, in short, my lord, I beg your lordship's pardon, you perhaps believe in no such person, those whom the Lord of life, when on earth, the most loved and the most cared for. So I would remind you that this is what Jesus these are the people that Jesus tried to protect. But I beg your pardon, because perhaps you don't believe in Jesus. You're not the kind of person who would. Okay? Very, very powerful attack here, isn't it? I mean, given that you're talking about a Christian society at the time. I'm sure, clearly you don't believe in Jesus, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. All right? These, my Lord, your accursed bill, which you are now going to revivify, consigns to close imprisonment, exclusion from worshipping God, to famishing and disease, to brutal violence, to horrible filth, and to premature death. Say not nay, my Lord. Don't say no, it's not true. Say not nay. Read the following facts and deny them if you can. Thousands, nay, tens of thousands are thus suffering under your bill of hell. Nay, going beyond this, you have dared, by the hands of reptile tyrants, perhaps the bastards of lords, to tie up the hands of freeborn Englishmen and women from obeying God in affording at their own expense to these poor, guiltless, meritorious, persecuted, perishing poor the food and the consolation that God, humanity and sympathy are demanding for them. Who then are we to obey? Man, I was going to say, lords, okay, or the Lord of Lords? Should we obey you, the lords, the members of Parliament who make these laws, or should we obey the Lord of Lords, God? All right, God is the Lord of Lords. Should we obey God, or should we obey you? All right. So this is a really, really powerful attack. And if we go back and look at the list of things, we can see that, damnation, eternal damnation to the fiend begotten. Okay, so we've got the poor law bill exposed. All right, it's a scandal. All right, plain remarks upon the new Poor Law Amendment Act. And then you've got the annual report of the Poor Law Commissioners. You've got political reports coming as well. And you've got arguments on both sides. I'm happy to be able to return what I hope will be considered a satisfactory answer to your inquiries, and so on. We've got people talking about it from both sides, those who are trying to attack it, those who are defending it. It's a really hot topic at this time. And it's so easy for us just to remember Oliver Twist, because that's the one that is famous now. But we need to understand that it was going on inside a context of a much wider range of publications. Okay? So, Ngram, thanks to Ngram, thanks to Google Books, with this application, we can see that there are two things that we didn't know and that we know now. The first thing would be that there's not just Oliver Twist. There's an awful lot of other stuff that's talking about the new Poor Law and the Poor Law Amendment Act at that time. And the other thing that we've learned, just by taking a look at one of them, is that, well, at least one person is writing in a much more direct, more kind of aggressive way than Dickens himself ever wrote. And this is really, hot stuff, isn't it? It's a violent attack. All right? So we learned a couple of things very quickly from going into Ngram. All right? It might also get us thinking about the political system. He's talking about the Lords. Do we know about the Lords? Do we know about the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and how it was divided? We might need to do a bit of background work on that, okay? But I'm going to just sort of move it into a different direction. Obviously, we've got this work by this man, Samuel Roberts, and we're going to want to know a little bit about who he might be. Okay? Samuel Roberts. Okay, and again, of course, Google is our friend. We can find out about pretty much anyone and anything. Although it's a fairly common name, so we might suppose that there'll be other people who talk about, that there'll be other Samuel Robertses around. So let's put in something that might cut it down a bit. See if we can find something about him. Okay, there's a wiki source. Okay. On Samuel Roberts. This is our Samuel Roberts coming up here. He was an author, he was a pamphleteer, he was known as the Pauper's Advocate. He was born in Sheffield. All right, so we've got quite a lot of information about him here. We've got this one here. Sheffield History Chat. Okay, Samuel Roberts. This one, it's actually somebody who's asking questions about the topic and is looking for a bit of help. Could you tell me where this quotation comes from? That opens up another thing, that the internet is not just sitting there passively waiting for you to search on it. You can ask people questions. You can go to groups like this and say, I don't know the answer to your question, but I've got another question of my own. Or you can see a conversation that people have had where they've given an answer to somebody's question. All right, you can interact here. And you can get people, I post on internet chat groups, so you can get people who are, university professors will answer your question, research students may answer your question. You can get a lot of help from other academics and other people around the world. Okay, so you've got an interactive relationship with the internet if you choose to have it, if you're brave enough to put your name up there and say, I'm asking this. But you can even ask anonymously, or you can choose some kind of, pseudonym. So you've got that aspect to it. We're going to want to go a little bit further. Perhaps if we're really interested in this man, we might want to go into Google Scholar. Oh, sorry, I just put in Scholar. We might want to say, okay, is this something that people have written about? Is this something that people have noticed? That Charles Dickens, and we'll put him in inverted commas to get the exact expression, Charles Dickens, and again, we'll put Samuel Roberts. Is this a connection that scholars have noticed? Is there stuff already out there that talks about this? We've got we've got J. Roach talking about it. We've got several articles coming up. So Roach's article might be of some use to it, on Sheffield boys and girls chanty schools, or we may or may not be interested in following that up, we can take a look. Okay. And again, of course, we don't want to spend our time reading the whole thing, so we'll just, search for our, the search terms that we're interested in. We'll search for Dickens. Okay. So I can't see it. Charles Dickens was describing in Bleak House Mrs. Jellyby's passionate concern. Oh, remember, we talked about that, how she was passionate for charity for children in Africa and neglecting her own children in Bleak House. Dickens makes a joke about that. Roberts, he talks about those two characters, those two writers, those two people, but he doesn't really talk about them very closely connected. So we might want to move on to another possibility. But there are several that are possibly useful for us. So I found one or two on the second page here that I thought might be useful. Culture and money in the 19th century. Okay, that's talking about Dickens, and it's talking about Samuel Roberts as well. Okay, I thought it was something that personally I might want to take a look at. They were white and they were slaves. All right, the exploitation, the actual slavery of white people. We always tend to think about black people, but again, in that context, Dickens and Roberts are mentioned by Hoffman in 1991. We've even got somebody referring to Dracula and managing to bring in, okay, Davison's paper on Dracula. That also manages to bring in these two particular characters. So we just don't know until we get started what we're going to find and where it's going to take us. But the point is that we need to know the tools. We need to know what's available. And I think this whole engram and it's called text mining. Okay, like a miner goes underground and looks for coal. We are mining the text for useful guides to things that we may find, oh, that's something I can research. All these people talking about the new poor law at the time of Oliver Twist, I want to know more about them, what they were saying. How does Dickens fit into that context? Okay, that's the sort of thing that I think you could usefully be doing. Okay,